Well, I'm one of the founding members of Okla Data, one of the sponsors of Okla Data as well for this show. And the show itself for us is pretty important, and it's important for me because it's about the dialogue. It's because so much of this conversation is generally is just native to native, Indian to Indian, sort of insider code. And so what this show is really about, and why I want to be a part of it, and why others be a part of it, is we wanted to have a dialogue with those who are considered outsiders, maybe, so that perhaps it can stir a little bit more interest as to what the dialogue could be, or not could be, but have expand the dialogue of what the centennial means. And that it truly represents what the fullness of what Oklahoma is. It's as much about the Sooners, it's as much about the Rush as it is about the Indian country. And that dialogue, Oklahoma sort of really encapsulates what's happened throughout the country. Oklahoma represented it most clearly. And so that's why we want to have the Okla Data talk.
What do you expect?
Well, Okla Data, we're fashioned after the Dada movement. And we really, the Dada movement was a European constructionist movement amongst artists. After you had these different wars that had happened in the 20th century, pretty much you had these artists saying, you know what, there's obviously something flawed that we keep having these conflicts. What do we need to do to address this and avoid it in the future? So it's not it's postmodern, yes, but it is not something where we're just going to highlight the problems and not really talk about solutions and responsibility. And the good thing about Okla Data is that we represent multiple generations of artists in age. We represent every media and type of art. We represent many different tribes because that's the Oklahoma experience. We very much reflect what Oklahoma is amongst tribes, and that is a panoply, this huge network of tribes. I mean, people they forget that we have 70 languages spoken here in this state, not one. We have 70, including English and Spanish. So we have to remember that. And so what we're bringing to this is saying, this isn't about survival. This is a celebration that, you know, we have not only survived, but we are beginning to thrive again. We're beginning to muscle ourselves again. It's about saying in the discourse of, yes, Oklahoma has a great political situation right now for the state at large. But it's important that we as Indians begin to talk to non-Indians more clearly about who we are, what our interests are, what our interests are not, what our intentions are, and what our intentions are not. There's a lot of misunderstanding there. I think that there's an assumption that we're bitter. There's an assumption that we're going to remain isolated, and it's the exact opposite. Because, you know, this year is important, yeah, for the centennial, but it's also important that this year the Indians, we became the #1 employer in this state. If money talks, you got to learn our language now. We can't have what we had before, but we will have something that's different than what we have had in the 20th century. It's a brave new world for Oklahoma. The Okla Data is www.okla.com. So Okla Data, and so I'll tell you a little bit about the work here. Sure. My style, I do all my work, whether it's this scale, which is pretty much a small scale, up to I have pieces that are multi-meter in dimension, but everything's done in one continuous line. Once I put pen to paper, I don't pick up. So in this particular piece, just technically what I did was, I actually did everything pretty much counterintuitive to what most people would do. Most people would want to start top, move down, move around. I actually started with the child, because this is a family unit, father, mother, and child, infant. So I started here, and I moved till right up in here. And then this is where it's complete. And so that's, you know, pretty much technically what this is, I'm using gel, I'm using ink. This is on a cotton paper. I use that because it's a higher quality of paper. And what this was is and this is something you need to know about this particular show, is each of the artists here, there's 60 artists represented, each one of us were allowed one piece. We've had 1 year to prepare one piece. Now, the reason why I chose to do this subject matter is that very rarely in Indian art do you actually see a whole family unit represented. It's just something we don't culturally do much. I don't know particularly why. I'm not particularly happy about it. That's why I do this. But what I wanted to do with this particular piece is that I wanted to depict that our people's survival was, we had to survive a very thoughtful strategy with the end result of our extermination and our eradication. And it became so violent, it became so just overwhelming in terms of the hopelessness that was going on because of the assault on our family that was happening. And my grandfather and my great uncles were taken from my family, taken from my great-grandmother to go to boarding school as kids, taken. It's not a long time ago. So is that recent? So what I wanted to depict was the fragility of how close we came to extermination. That we came to a very thin line, separated existence and separated extermination. And that I wanted to not have a lot of color in here because I wanted people to understand that this Oklahoma, this land is red because it was christened by our blood. And that in the end, the only thing that kept us together was this strong tie and line of family. This is why we survived. So,
Awesome.
my pleasure.
Appreciate that.